All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session. Yet another installment in our seminar for Amex 2.0. You don't need me to introduce myself, but I am here to introduce our speaker of the afternoon, Michael Sorrell. Michael is an award-winning father, a record-breaking basketball player, and the 34th president of Paul Quinn College. Paul Quinn was established in 1872. So it's well on its way into its second century. It's based in Dallas now. It is, among other things, one of the 8 national work colleges. So this is an integration of work and service and learning, something that all of us in our seminar hold dear. So I think we're going to see a practical application of some of the principles that we've discussed over the past several days. The college operates under the motto, "We over me," which actually echoes the motto of the school I attended in non sibi, not for self. And again, this is a notion that we have worked with over the.
Jesuit school?
It's not, but it has religious origins. So this is right. So, and to that point, the college embraces the principles or the founding principles of the AME Church. So there is a religious component to what you do. In the context of a seminar where we have, over these past few days, been talking about change and how you make it happen, Michael's bio and Paul Quinn College's website suggests that you are a turnaround artist. A lot has been happening on the campus over the past few years, and I hope that you'll be able to talk to us about that. So again, in the context of a discussion where we have repeatedly asked ourselves, if we want change, how are we going to make it happen? My sense is, Michael, that you've made it happen at Paul Quinn, and you probably have a long agenda that goes beyond that. The last thing I'll say before turning this over to Michael, all of us, when we arrived for dinner on Sunday evening, were asked to provide one item from our history that does not appear in our bio. I'm going to do that for you, and then you can do it for yourself. What I have observed, you've been here for 24 hours. And during that time, you have spoken with, engaged with a lot of the people who are in the audience right now. It's an excellent strategy for a speaker, and it's an excellent trait in a leader. So welcome. Thank you.
All right. Give yourselves a big hand. So I am a big believer that you should try to do things that don't result in you getting booed. So what I'd like to suggest is during the course of our time together, because the reality of it is we're going to have a conversation. We're going to engage in a dialogue. And what I'd like to do is if at any moment you have a question, just stop me and ask the question. Or if there's something that doesn't seem quite right, let's talk about it. Because one of the things that I have learned in my time as the president of Paul Quinn, even beyond, is that no matter where you are, it presents an opportunity for you to learn. And I learn as much from you as you learn from me. So please don't be passive participants in our time together. Can we strike a deal on that? Yes. Okay, let me back up for a second. So I am a historically black college president. Right, there you go. The black colleges are typically found in a faith-based context, right? We are born out of the black church tradition, which is a call and response tradition. So if I ask you something and 3 people respond, we have a problem. So let's try this again, all right? Do we have a deal?
Yes.
Much better, much, much better. Thank you. I was about to go home, all right? So 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, I became president of Paul Quinn College. And here's the thing. When people offer you jobs that you don't apply for, run, okay? It typically means one of 2 things. Either A, you're so amazing that people are walking around the streets thinking, God, I really wish that person would come run my organization. Now, if you're one of those people that believes that someone is walking around the streets thinking that about you, you do not need to be in leadership positions, right? You are an egomaniac, all right? So stay away from that place. The second thing is that it could just be because no one else wants the job, all right? Realistically, that's how I became a college president. I didn't have any prior training. I didn't take any education classes in school. These are all things that my sister, who is a 20-plus year public school teacher in Chicago, loves to remind me of, right? In fact, when I called her to tell her that they had offered me the job, she laughed. She said, "Of course someone called you up while you're driving down a highway to offer you a college presidency." She's like, "Who else does this stuff happen to?" She says, "You know, you are the Black Forrest Gump," right? Like that is, so you get to see a sense of my sibling relationship, all right? But when I became president of Paul Quinn, it wasn't because I was the first choice. I was the absolute last choice, okay? I was the last choice because I didn't even apply for the job. It wasn't something that I sought. The school was failing. The Boston Consulting Group had come in and they had done a study of the institution and said that if we didn't make some significant changes, drastic changes, that in 18 months to 2 years, the school would go out of business. Now, when you have that scenario, people don't then typically turn those institutions over to people with no experience in the field, right? Like they don't. That's how I knew I was the last choice, because no one else took the job. Everyone kept turning them down, and they got to a place and they were like, well, you know, maybe Mike will do it, right? And for me, I took the job for 3 very, very basic reasons. Number one, I am who I am because historically Black colleges got it right. Okay, I am the son of a mother who went to Dillard University. Her mother went to Dillard University. My mother's first cousin, who was raised as her sister, she and my mother went to college together at Dillard. My godfather went to Dillard. My sister went to Talladega. My cousins went to Morehouse, Howard, Spelman, Hampton, forgetting somebody, FAMU, because he was in the band, right? So I can't forget that. So we are a family where if you went to college, you went to a historically Black college. So my mother grew up in the rural South. They were very, very poor. They were so poor that when she and her first cousin went to college together, they couldn't afford college and clothes for the girls. So they bought one set of clothes. No big deal, except my mother was 5'11" and my aunt is about 5'6", right? So there was sacrifice involved, there was struggle, but they became something different. They became, in essence, these amazing people because of what historically Black colleges did for them, what they poured into them, right? My sister was a student that needed a little extra time and a little extra attention. What Talladega gave her, I am forever grateful for. And so for me, it was a way of saying thank you. Thank you for what you allowed my family to become, which afforded me a life of, you know, tremendous privilege where, you know, my parents did very, very well. I went to the best schools in the country. I've had a great life, but the root of that happened to be historically Black colleges. The number 2 reason was that when I moved to Dallas, I was recruited by a big law firm out of law school. And when I got there, the people at the firm were great, but the folks that made Dallas home were graduates of Paul Quinn College. Some of them were my fraternity brothers. I met them playing basketball. And, you know, they welcomed me into their circle. And, you know, they would invite me to cookouts, they introduced me to their friends. And look, I'm a big guy. If you invite me to a cookout, I'm eating, right? And if I'm eating, you're not eating as much. So it is a sacrifice to invite me. So I appreciated that. But they were kind in ways they didn't have to be kind. And I fundamentally believe when people are good to you, you say thank you, right? And so giving back to Paul Quinn was part of my way of saying thank you. But then the third reason was just simply because I just thought people deserved better. People deserve better than to be at an institution that was failing them. They deserve better than to be in an environment which didn't communicate to them hope and aspirational dreams, and that didn't challenge what the preconceived notions of their possibilities were going to be. And I thought I could make a difference in that. Now, in all honesty, it was incredibly hard, right? I mean, it was insanely hard. It was stressful. You know, when I took the job, the chairman of the board, so at the time I was running my own company, and one of the things we were doing was planning and negotiating to buy an NBA franchise. if we had been successful, I was going to be the president of the franchise and a part owner. So I'm thinking I'm moving to Memphis to be president of the Grizzlies, and life's going to be great. I'm going to have a lot of money. It's going to be cool. I had a dream, right? I had a dream. And the chair of the board calls up while I'm driving to scout Kevin Durant, and he says, how'd you like to be president? Like, we're buying a basketball team. He said, you can do both. I was like, you can't do both. You can't be president of an NBA franchise in one state and president of a college in another. And I said, like, you're a man of the cloth. Shouldn't you be bound to tell the truth? Like, what are you doing? And, you know, I thought about it, prayed about it, called him back and said, you know what? I'll do this for 3 months. We'd already submitted our bid to David Stern at the NBA. That was the amount of time it was going to take for them to rule on it. And I thought, I'll do it for 3 months and then I'll move on. The first day on campus, I felt a sense of calm that I'd never felt before. The majority of my career, I've done these really interesting things. Like, I've worked in the White House, I've worked at big law firms, I've been an entrepreneur, I've done crisis management, I've represented NBA lottery picks. I've done cool stuff. But at the whole time, internally, I didn't feel as if I was living my authentic life, right? I was living in a place on the way to the place. And so it was never the sense of comfort that I experienced when I walked on the campus. Now, the campus was a mess. We had 15 abandoned buildings. The entire front of the campus were abandoned buildings. In fact, I'll tell you a true story. I was recruiting students one day, speaking at a school, and one young lady, in only the way that high school students can be, you know, she said, your school is jankety, right? Yeah, you know, she was giving me the full sister girl head, you know, nod, and she said, you all have trees growing out of the roofs on your buildings, which was absolutely true, right? But I was not going to concede the floor to some 16-year-old, right? So, you know, I respond, I was like, are you talking about our green roofs? I said, this is the latest in eco-friendly, like, architecture. You're just not on top of things. And she's looking at me like, wait, what? Are you, you know, and I looked at her, and I was like, right? So, you know, sort of, the place was struggling. The students, everyone was upset. No one was happy that we had low morale. It was just bad. And so to find peace in a place of discomfort seemed odd to me. But again, I was committed to doing this for 90 days, but I never behaved as if I was only going to do it for 90 days. So the second day, I cut the football program, right? Which, you know, upset the football team, okay? In fact, you know, we were in an auditorium. Some of them got really upset, you know, ran down to the stage, wanted to yell and scream. You know, I mean, I'm not a little guy, but when your offensive linemen are smaller than your college president, there's a problem, right? Like, you might not should be playing football, okay? But we couldn't afford it. It wasn't consistent with the values that we were going to bring to the institution. And I want you to keep in mind the word values, because that's actually what this talk is going to be about, right? It's change as a product of values-based leadership, okay? And so at no point was I behaving as an interim president. And, you know, it's hard, and I was struggling. And I go to church on Sundays, and my pastor, he says, you know, we're going to preach a series of sermons this summer about your calling. And he said, this Sunday, we're talking about recognizing your calling. Go to church the next Sunday, sermon was answering your calling. Next Sunday, don't run away from your calling, right? I mean, it was just, you know, after a while, you're kind of like, Lord, I need my calling to be in Memphis, okay? That's how I see this going. And it was amazing what happened, right? I became a fundamentally different person. Now, there were pieces of who I am today that were always present, right? Like, I mean, I was always someone that was very supportive of under-resourced communities. I was always someone that was willing to put his money where his values happened to be. I was always someone that was an advocate for those who didn't have advocates. But they were always bits and pieces that were sort of disjointed. And what Paul Quinn did was give me the platform to bring all these things together. And it was a challenge, right? To be quite candid with you. When I started at Paul Quinn, people laughed at me, all right? I mean, no one thought taking this job was a good idea. In fact, the only person who thought it was a good idea was the woman I was dating at the time, all right? Who, you know, was doing that supportive, you know, I love you, baby, I'm ride or die, I'm here with you, you know, I just need to make sure this is a check in, you know, my good marks. She wound up being my wife, so there could have been something to that, right? But she was just like, hey, whatever you decide to do, I'll support you. The next, the next person that counted as supportive was a good friend of mine who said, hey, look, you can't possibly make it worse, right? It's like, thank you for that ringing endorsement for my skill set, all right? So, took the job, and it was a very emotional experience because people from under-resourced communities have been lied to and betrayed for a long time. You don't get to that place because America fulfilled its promise to you. You don't get to that place because the elected officials or your teachers or your institutions lived up to their bargains to you. You got to that place because it is the culmination of decades of failures, right, and deception. So if you don't know, if you don't recognize, if you've been lied, let me say it this way, if you've been lied to for a long time, you're not going to trust people right out of the gate. So when I would go talk to the community, people are like, yeah, no, you know, you've done great things in the city, and I appreciate it, but you're not going to stay. Right? You're not going to stay because you don't have to stay. Why would someone like you be here with us? Why would someone like you stay? Think about that for a moment, all right? Think about what that says about the people who are communicating that to you. But think about how disappointed you have to be to come to a place to believe that you don't deserve people who will advocate for you, right? And that, you know, let me just stop the remarks I wanted to say and just talk about that for a moment. We are in an era where we need people to lead. We need people to step away from the fear that comes from thinking that people are going to punish you for having a voice, right? We have to have a voice. We have to use that voice. We cannot be people who are afraid to stand up for what we know is right. It's not that hard. And yes, sometimes people aren't going to like you for using your voice. So what? I am less popular today than I've ever been, right? Because I dared to push back, all right? And the interesting part about it is I feel more blessed than I've ever felt in my entire life. And that is far more worth it. There are people out there, right? I walk through the schools in the inner cities of our country, and no one should go to school in an environment like that, right? You should not go to school in an environment where you have to walk through metal detectors. You should not go to school in environments where the teachers are there because there's no else for them to go, right? You should not go to school in an environment where people don't expect you to excel, where they don't expect you to be great, where they are coaching you down, where you have an interest in science and they are telling you to be a physical therapist, not because your joy is physical therapy, but because they think med school is too difficult for you, right? I didn't go to those schools. I didn't grow up in those places, right? My parents told me when I came home and I said I wanted to be a lawyer, my mother told me, she's like, oh, I don't know if that's ambitious enough, right? She's like, if you're gonna be a lawyer, be the best lawyer, right? Be great. Whatever it is you decide to do, be great. But everyone doesn't have that advantage. We have a Bible passage that we teach the students. We call it the Quinnite Bible passage. And it's Isaiah chapter 58, verses 9 through 12. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but the essence of it is it challenges us to be repairers of the breach, okay? To stand in the gap and be advocates for those who don't have advocates, right? To give voice to the voiceless and hope to the hopeless. Repair the streets, repair the broken homes, stop speaking ill of others, right? And the essence is what it talks about. If we want to lead, that is the challenge of leadership. That is the challenge. Is it's easy to go out and be advocates for people who have advocates. It's easy to be in the places where you have plenty of resources. But can you be in the places where you don't have resources other than your resourcefulness? Right? That is the challenge of leadership. Now, to get off the soapbox for a moment, to go back to what I was talking about. So here we are in an institution that's struggling, and people don't believe in us. All right? And so you have a choice to make in that environment. You can, reduce the level of your dreams, or you can just charge forward. So we said, we're going to become one of America's great small colleges. Now, at the time, it was the most ridiculous statement ever, okay? Because there was no path to that. I mean, when I started, it was March 27th. Graduation was the first Saturday in May. We had no graduation speaker. We had 5 students qualified to graduate. We had 30 days of cash on hand. We had a 1% graduation rate. We had, everything was broken, right? Everything was broken. And there was no clear way forward to the end of the summer, let alone becoming one of America's great small colleges. But if you're gonna dream big, right? If you're gonna do something big, you first have to see it in your mind's eye. You have to have vision. You have to inspire people. And no one is ever inspired by saying, we're going to be average, right? Average, everybody together, average, right? Like there's this great quote from the city of Chicago, and I can't believe I don't remember the guy's name, but it said, make no small plans because they don't possess the magic to stir men's souls, right? Or stir men's blood. All right? I'm paraphrasing, so just work with me here on it. So we started saying that. And people laughed at us. I mean, I'm talking about laughed at us. I remember being in the grocery store, just trying to buy some food, and people coming up to me in the aisle being like, you're never gonna make it. Like, you all are gonna fail. That school's gonna close. Right? I remember being on the treadmill, and people coming up next to me, and I'm sweating because I hate running on the treadmill anyway, right? And I'm running, and they're like, yeah, man, so you think you're gonna make it? Think it's gonna work? I don't know if you can make it. Like, I'm just like, first of all, leave me alone, right? Like, I don't understand people who talk to you on the treadmill. And just for the record, in case you're people who talk to people on treadmills or ellipticals, the length of time that you talk to people is this long, literally. Hey, how are you? I'll talk to you when you get done, right? Like, that's the length of the conversation. So, nobody's laughing, which means you are those people. Right? I struck too close to your heart on that one. Don't worry, we'll work on that. So people were dismissive of us. And then you have staff members who didn't believe, right? Who had become functional in the dysfunctionality of the organization, right? And in fairness to them, right, I don't think they were bad people. I just think that if you exist in a broken environment for too long, you become broken. Right? Now, the path back is whether or not you can take the path back. Some people could, some people couldn't. One thing that's really important about any transformation is to understand that there will be casualties. Everyone can't come along for the ride. It's just not possible. And the biggest mistake you can make is trying to think everyone can. That doesn't mean that you be needlessly harsh or offensive or anything like that. It's simply accepting the realities of the situation that you find yourself in, all right? And how you handle people next says a lot about you, okay? I can't tell you that I handled every situation correctly. I didn't. There's some I'd like to have back, right? I was stressed out. I woke up every day with the goal of just trying not to be the last picture on the wall. We had a president's dining room, and it had all 33 presidents' pictures on the wall. And all I could think about was, if I fail, I'm the last picture on the wall. The school survived the antebellum South. It survived, you know, young black men and women that couldn't read or write. It survived Jim Crow. It survived all of that, but it couldn't survive Michael Sorrell, right? Not the page you want to be associated with in history, all right? So we set this big goal, and then we thought, well, how do we get there? How do we do it? And the first thing I realized was that we didn't really have values that we rallied around. Right? Now, I am a big city boy. I am a cynical Chicago native, all right? So the first time I heard someone talk about values in an organization, I thought they were corny. I thought they were sappy. I thought that they were just ridiculous, right? And I dismissed it. I was at an organization. I was doing some work as a consultant, and they kept talking about their values. It wasn't until the very last person talked to me about that. He came in, you know, I'd been there all day, and I said, tell me about the values. And he said, the values saved my life. They made me a better husband, and they made me a better father. So at this point, you know, I'm sort of like, I set my class down, right? I'm like, tell me the story. And he said, you know, I wasn't always a good man. I ran around on my wife, I drank too much, and I was gonna lose my children, and I was gonna lose my wife, and I was gonna lose my job here. And someone pulled me in and said, we need you to embrace our institutional values. He said, we need you to understand what these mean. And he said for the first time in his life, he just shook his head, he immersed himself in them, he found the power in them, and he allowed them to transform his existence. Now, I don't care how cynical you are, when you hear a story like that, it affects you. And I remembered that, right? So I guess it was 5 years later when I take the presidency at Paul Quinn, I look and I said, we need some values. What could be our values? And since I was gonna have to sell it, I thought about what are my values? What are the things that I care most deeply about? What's my personal value system? And you know, I went to a Jesuit school. The Jesuits tell you to be men and women for others, right? It's kind of their thing. And I thought about it, I said, okay, you know, I can't just still be men and women of others, right? Like I think there's some copyright issue. We can't pay for it, so we're gonna have to refashion it, right? So we thought about it and we came up with we over me. The needs of a community supersede the wants of an individual. It means you don't get to be selfish, all right? If we're going to focus on leadership, then leaders must be selfless. I tell my students all the time, you should not lead people you do not know, but you definitely should never lead people you cannot love, right? Because you have to make the sacrifices necessary to be great. Yes, ma'am.
Who were developing those core values with you? Like, what was the team that you put around?
Yeah, no, there wasn't.
It was just you.
The bulk of it was me, right? So you have to understand, when we started, I didn't have a lot of help, right? Not internally, okay? So I might talk to some of my friends. Like one of the things I did was I went, and again, this was a crisis situation, and in a crisis situation is not a democracy, right? Like you don't have the luxury of a democracy at that point, you know, but if all you do is build a monument to yourself, if all you do is exist in a crisis state for prolonged periods so you can be the lead, that's a problem, right? It is a transitional state. You are building as you go, right? I wasn't comfortable just doing things on my own. I didn't have the help I needed internally, so I had to go externally, right? So I visited something like 30 colleges. And you know, I mean, I was one of those people, I'd call you up, and nobody had ever heard of Paul Quinn, and they hadn't heard of me. I didn't come from higher ed. So I called people up and I said, hey, my name is Michael Sorrell, I'm president of Paul Quinn College, you know, it's so great, like life's great, everything's great, blah, 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 right? And they're like, who the hell is this guy, right? And I said, listen, you're doing amazing work in this area, and I want to come visit your school, right? Do you have time to talk to me, right? And they said, well, you know, I said, well, if you don't have time to talk to me, can I talk to your staff, right? And then once I got on campus, you know, I was already on campus. And once you blessed my attendance, you know, I just wander into rooms. Hey, you know, I'm here visiting President so-and-so. And you drop the president's name, everybody's gonna take a minute to meet with you, right? So, and so I started taking bits and pieces of things, right? And we didn't have it to start with, right? So, we over me. Then I thought about, we're gonna be leaders. How do you communicate the fundamental principles of leadership. One of the mistakes I think academicians make is they get all lost in their heads. Okay, it's all like, you know, complicated speak, and they go to conferences and they talk to themselves and everybody pats each other on the back and nobody knows what the hell they're talking about outside of the room. And so, you know, I thought, let's make it plain, all right? Like there's true power in making it plain. So came up with the 4 L's of Quinnite leadership, right? Leave places better than you found them. Lead from wherever you are, live a life that matters, and love something greater than yourself, all right? So leave places better than you found them. That gave us an objective standard to measure our performance by, okay? Every encounter that you go through, did you leave it better than you found it? All right, were people better off because you were there, or were they worse off because you were there? That's an easy one to measure. Live a life that matters, that speaks to your legacy. People are going to remember you. They're going to remember something about you. So how about you make sure that what they remember is something that enriches their existence and their soul and their being. Lead from wherever you are. Oftentimes we make excuses for not leading. We say, I don't have the power. I don't have the title. It's not my turn. What I'm saying is none of that matters, right? You can lead in every situation you're in. And by the way, if you don't practice leading, when it's your turn to lead, you're not going to be very good at it.
On that note, thanks for coming, by the way.
No,
speaking with us.
my pleasure.
And by the way, it's Daniel Burnham.
That's who, yeah, Daniel, the architect. Yeah.
The city planner.
Yeah.
Can you reflect a little bit about the HBCU presidents visiting the White House when Trump came in office? I don't know if you were there.
No, I didn't go.
Okay. And how others thought about that experience and
Yeah.
what you're thinking about it?
So, listen, I think people's actions speak volumes, right? I can hear you, but I'd rather feel you, all right? So if your behavior is inconsistent with what you are telling me, then I think I have to be wary of that scenario, all right?
Can you say that again, please?
Can I say that again?
Again. Just one more time.
If your behavior is inconsistent with what it is your words are saying, I don't think I have to trust you, all right? I mean, listen, leadership is a trust compact, all right? Like you can have the title and not have the role. People follow you because they believe in you, because they trust you, and they trust you to improve their lives, not improve your life, okay? Like these are just some of the basic rules. So people went because they believed that there was a sincere offer on the table. They thought that there was going to be an opportunity to have a candid conversation, and that their values, their views, and their expectations would be addressed. They did not go thinking that they would be reduced to a photo op. Right? I worked in the White House, right? I know what it looks like. And again, when you're on the campaign trail and David Duke says he's with you and you don't disavow David Duke, now let's be clear, the Klan expects you to disavow them, right? They know who they are, right? They understand the deal. You shouldn't be able to get elected and not disavow the Klan, right? Like, I mean, like, this is just, it's sort of the compact, right? He didn't disavow the Klan. I never forgot that. So everything from that moment forward doesn't come as a surprise, right? When people show you who they are, you should believe them, right? Now, I also believe there are some people who really want to do good things for HBCUs, right? I went to the meetings the next day with the congressional leaders, and they struck me as being sincere, right? And as looking for ways to create opportunities. And so, you know, I don't think that you you know, exist in a place where you aren't willing to listen. Right? I think you do listen, but I think you listen all the way through, right? Not just when people are talking to you, right? You listen when they're talking to others and how they're treating others, and when they're talking about things that matter to you. So, you know, that's just how, you know, I viewed it. I mean, but I was, you know, yeah, we'll just leave it at that, right? Yes, ma'am.
I was just going back to your values and wondering what the difference for you would be for values and guiding principles, and then how you kind of show those values on a daily basis at your college. Do you have them up on the wall? Do you talk about them? Do you come from that place all the time?
Yeah. So, I think your values should be your guiding principles, right? But I also think that they are foundational, right? And so I'll give you sort of a difference, right? So we have one more set of values that I would tell you are really important, and that is this idea of choosing the harder right over the easier wrong without apparent regard to self-interest, okay? And again, it speaks to selflessness. It speaks to your character. People think it's really easy to make the right decision when the lights are on, okay? When people are watching you and you're like, ooh, I don't want to be ridiculed. I don't want to be thought poorly of. So I'm going to make the right decision at this moment in time. It is entirely a different ball game to make the right decision when you can get away with the wrong decision, okay? And the wrong decision or doing wrong may advance your personal agenda, all right? Choose the harder right over the easier wrong. So those three concepts, right? We over me, the 4 L's of Quinnite leadership, and choosing the harder right over the easier wrong, those guide it. Those guide us every single day. I teach a class in the summers in our summer bridge program. So I get almost all of the incoming students, and it's called Introduction to Quinnite Servant Leadership. And we call ourselves the Quinnites, right? It's Quinnite Nation, it's nation building. And we started talking about nation building when we had 200 students, right? You know, people were like, what the hell are you talking about, nation building? How about you just build a school, right? And, you know, I just told them, I said, listen, it's sort of like the principle of Gideon's army, right? I'll take my 200 committed souls over your 15,000 and we'll win, right? So you have to believe. But we teach them these things, and we teach them some other things. I'm gonna run through them very quickly for you just so you have them. So, you know, other than we over me and other than our values, we teach them that closed mouths don't get fed, okay? And I recognize it's not perfect language, right? But the point of it is so people remember it. And what it means is we have an obligation to speak up and tell people about what we want and what we need. Because in under-resourced communities, we are so accustomed to seeing ourselves beaten down, and we think nobody cares, so we never speak up. We never use our voice. So you have to use your voice, right? We tell them, and this is important, especially in these racially charged times, you can be my kind and not be my color. All right, like we have associated race with being that characteristic that unifies or divides us, all right? There are some commonalities. We do find great comfort in being culturally within the places that we find comfort. And many times we find comfort with people who share our racial and ethnic makeup, right? Or our religious makeup, or our country, or whatever it is, right? But there's another way of looking at this, okay? People who share your values can help you build a community that is most meaningful to you, all right? Every black person doesn't care about the things I care about, right? Nor should they. But every white person's not my adversary. Right? But if you don't talk to people, how would you ever know? Which goes back to closed mouths don't get fed, right? We have a set of beliefs, We believe poverty is evil, right? We believe debt is bad. We believe everyone can learn, and we believe collectively we all can do better, all right? And let me go back. Poverty is evil. 80 to 85% of our students at Paul Quinn College are on Pell Grants, okay? 70% of our students have zero expected family contributions. That means no one in the family can help them out with anything other than an encouraging word and some support, all right? Poverty does things to people, right? It creates this, it gets in your soul, right? And it saps the essence of your being, and it challenges your ability to have hope. So we want poverty to be framed in the harshest terms. It is evil. None of us should be in an environment where we think it's okay for other people to be living in poverty, right? We think debt is bad. We think the idea that we tell students, oh, it's okay if you're $50,000 in debt because you're gonna have a better life. If your family makes $30,000 a year and you have more debt for school than they have income in a year, that's bad, right? We don't have to dress it up. We don't have to make it complicated. It's bad, and we want it framed as such. That's why we created a whole new model of higher education. We're an urban work college. We reduced tuition and fees by $10,000. We created a path forward where our students can graduate owing less than $10,000 if they so choose, right? Because we wanted to challenge this notion of how things get done. We think everyone can learn, right? Now this is important because our students' average ACT score is a 17, okay? Which, you know, people would tell you means there is no way they can develop, all right, that they're behind. We think that's just garbage, okay? We think it's a point of, can you inspire people? Can you introduce things in the classroom that capture them, all right? I believe I can teach anyone anything simply by identifying that which moves them the most. So I'll give you an example. This summer, I wanted my students to work on their ability to tell their personal narrative. Okay, now, I could have gone out and found some books where people talked about telling your personal narrative, right? And giving a reading assignment about your personal narrative. Or we could communicate in a language which they were already speaking. So I gave them an assignment. Come in with your theme song. Identify a song which speaks to the essence of you, and we'll play it in class, and we'll talk about why that song resonates with you and why it communicates who you are. We had no issue teaching people about how to control their narratives once we did that, right? Because you created a space that they were comfortable using what they believed in and what they wanted to talk about, right? Made a huge difference. And then we think all of us together can do better. You know, none of this, you don't build monuments to yourself. You don't run off on an island, which is why I was particularly uncomfortable having to make the types of decisions we had to make starting out, right? But we just didn't have a choice. Like, you know, like it wasn't working otherwise. So we have a formula for how we do that. We preach hope. I mean, relentlessly we preach hope. We talk about the inevitability of your success, that you will, if you are willing to work hard enough, you will be great. All right, we believe in you. We practice patience. Every rose doesn't bloom on the first day of spring. It just doesn't. All of us have had to develop in some way, shape, or form, right? So why don't we be patient with the students and not expect perfection from day one? See the long-range plan. We instill resilience. Bless you. One of the things that's interesting about students that come from under-resourced communities is that they don't have a deep reservoir of resilience. You know, because, you know, I think it's called the imposter syndrome, right? You're here, but you don't really believe you should be here, right? Like, you're not here because you belong. So if something bad happens to you, it serves to reinforce the notion that you weren't supposed to be here anyway. You know, so, and it can be something as simple as, you know, you're writing with a pen. The pen explodes. The pen ruins your pants, gets all over your hands and your shirt, and you don't have a lot. So you use that as an indication that maybe you shouldn't have been here, because it just reminds you of all the things you don't have. I can't tell you the number of pens I broke in my school pants. Right? It never occurred to me I didn't deserve to be in school, right? But that was because I could go home, my mother would yell, be like, Michael, you have to be more careful about blowing up pens in your pocket, and then she'd go buy me a new pair of pants, right? You have to recognize that all of us don't come from the same places. So we've got to instill in our students the ability to push through those challenging moments. We tell our students, don't let a stumble become a fall. That's how we communicate it to them. We teach entrepreneurial thought and entrepreneurial action. Now, I stole that from Aspen College, right? I love Aspen, wonderful people. I go visit them all the time. And they do that. Our point is, in life, you're going to need to be an entrepreneur of your own life. Okay, that doesn't mean that you're running around thinking about how can I make money off of my own life. It does mean that you have to be creative enough to envision a life that can respond to the different challenges and changes. I started out a corporate securities lawyer, right? I was not having fun, okay? Now, there were people who were great at it. I was never gonna be more than good at it because I didn't love it, okay? So I started looking around, and I was open and receptive to changing the course of my career, because I started thinking about it. What else can I do? How can I remake myself? How can I become comfortable in a personally uncomfortable space while I am going through these changes? Right? And then the last one that we do for our formula is we lead with love. Now, the greatest lesson I was ever taught as a college president was this lesson. Early on in my tenure, we had a woman who worked at the college who was the quintessential Southern mom, right? Those of you who have lived in the South, like you know, right? And one day, I got into a yelling argument with one of my male students, and I was early on, it was my first summer, you know, I mean, I was stressed, like it wasn't my proudest moment, okay? And, you know, I said something to him, he didn't like what I had said, so he reacted negatively. I was like, are you gonna react negatively? I came back at him, right? And next thing you know, we are going at it, right? So we're yelling and screaming at each other, going up the stairs to my office. We get in the office, close the door. You know, I'm still in attack mode, and he breaks down in tears, just starts crying. And this, you know, this is some cat, you know, braids in his hair, you know, think he would be rough, right? And I'm just like, how you gonna start crying? You know, I'm like, I don't know what to do with that, right? Like I didn't have my sensitive coat on that day, right? And he's crying, she's there with us, and she kind of soothes him and gets him out of the room, and then she comes back in, she kind of rocks in the chair, she says, baby, you know, I met your mother, and your mother was tough. She was tough on you. She said, but she loved you. She said, I would argue you've never spent 1 second of your life wondering if you were loved. She's like, really? You might have been overloved. And I was like, I think she just threw some shade at me, right? Like, I think you just called me spoiled, right? And so she said, but, so whenever your mother was tough on you, you didn't hear tough, you heard love. She said, but if people don't know love, how would they hear anything else but tough? She said, I know you love them, but if you want them to know you love them, you're gonna have to lead with love. Changed my life, right? Just candidly. It saved my presidency before I even knew my presidency would have been in trouble, right? Saved my presidency and made me a completely different person. So if you follow me on social media, if you are ever on my campus and I'm there, you will be struck by the relationship that I have with my students. I love my students. I tell my students I love them, that I am proud of them. You will see pictures that we take where we are all hugged up on each other, right? It is a very different relationship. And it is because she told me to lead with love and I listened, right? Because don't make the mistake of thinking because you're a leader, you know everything. You don't know everything. Chances are you might not even know as much as the people working in the cafeteria, right? Because, you know, we get this idea that because we're in one place and these folks over here, that we're smarter, that we know more. Like, we don't know more. Like, we just fit a prototype, okay? The best ideas that I've ever gotten from my school have come from the folks that work in facilities, right? They changed our recruiting model. They changed because they were more in touch with what people needed. No, no.
You said something really profound that...
Just one thing? I've been talking all this time and I've had one profound thing.
Do you have 12 pages here? But, one of the 12 pages that I have, you talked about something that I think we might experience in our career, or it might be something that we can share with others that we mentor. And you talk about when you were at a place waiting to get to the place that you were supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little more about that?
About that? Yeah, so that is so hard because it's how you handle those moments where you don't fit, all right, where you genuinely don't fit, and you know you don't fit, and you're trying really hard to fit because that's what life has coached you to believe that you should do, right? I mean, I went to law school, everyone told me I was gonna be a really good lawyer, and I'm sitting there, I was like, oh, I don't think this is gonna be me, and I could never find my comfortable place in the law, right? I mean, just I would be, like, I do well on assignments, and sometimes maybe I wouldn't do as well, and I just like I couldn't get there. And I remember one day my mother came to visit me, and I was really having a hard time. And look, if you're a young associate at a law firm, you are really dependent upon one of the partners identifying you and then working with you, right? Giving you work, living through your mistakes, like just grooming you. And I couldn't find that, right? The partner that I had come to work there because he had built the section and was amazing, he left less than a month in to go do something else, to buy failed S&Ls and get rich. And when he came in to tell me he was leaving, I was like, all right, cool, where are we going? And he was like, you're not going. And I was like, I came here to work with you, right? And he was, you know, and it was a really telling lesson for me. So I couldn't find that person to mentor me. And I was struggling because, you know, you got to make your hours. And I couldn't understand, like I hadn't failed at things before. And everyone talked about how much problems, like I just couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. And my mom came to visit, and I'll never forget this. We were standing in my kitchen, and, you know, we were talking, and I just broke down in tears, right? Like, I mean, I was frustrated. I was scared because this was, you know, like my first, I worked in between grad school and law school for a year, but I'd always known that I was going back to law school. So, you know, and I was like, if I fail, what am I going to do? And what does that say about me? And, you know, my mother put her arms around me and she let me cry and she walked me through it. And, you know, she explained to me some realities of life when you are someone like me, right? And she gave me that comfort and she gave me that confidence. And I'm a really confident person, but I don't care how confident you are, we all have moments of doubt, right? We all have moments of insecurity. And this is something else. As a leader, don't you dare forget those moments, right? Don't you forget how you felt when you were vulnerable. And then when someone on your staff, someone under your charge is going through that, remember what that felt like and remember what the difference or what a difference people who were there for you made in your life, and do that for other people. All right? I mean, you'd be surprised the number of times that I sit with my staff and people cry in my office, or I'm sitting there, quote unquote, interviewing boyfriends, right? And things like that, because those things matter to people, right? You must always maintain the human touch. And I'm getting really far afield, but I'm gonna come back here in a second. And so what my mother did was she gave me the courage to just keep going, right? Like, and sometimes that's the best blessing you can receive, is the confidence, the reassurance that your better day is coming. Now, it doesn't mean it's coming tomorrow, right? It may be next month. But if you give up, you'll never know. And so the other thing that it did was it taught me that my path wasn't going to be anyone else's path, right? I mean, I have walked away from things people have thought I was crazy for doing. I've turned down jobs, I've turned down presidencies that, you know, people want me to be psychologically examined for wellness, right? But this feeds my soul, right? Like, I have purpose. We're building a national network of urban work colleges to address the issues of urban poverty, because that's what I care about, right? That's what I came to do. So I just think that, remember, right here, right now is not the last chapter of your story. Keep writing, keep going. You know, making my son learn Langston Hughes's Mother to Son, right? And in Mother to Son, it talks about life for me ain't been no crystal stair, right? And she says, you know, I just kept going, right? Keep going. Yes, ma'am.
So this is just continuing along your conversation with your mother and asking you the core values that your mother and family taught you in your formative years to now, and how the alignment occurred.
Well, one would argue that we've built a school around the values that my mother and grandmother and grandfather and father instilled in me, right? I mean, because trust me, I just jazzed them up, okay? But my mother told me you have an obligation to leave places better than you found them. My grandmother told me that, you know, baby boy, you have to find something bigger than yourself to care about, right? So that's love something greater than yourself. They told me that they had expectations of me that I would lead, right? So lead from wherever you are. You know, the live a life that matters, I completely got that. As a freshman in high school, I took a world history class at St. Ignatius, and they talked about Renaissance men and people who were remembered for their contributions in their era, and that those contributions lived forever. And at 13, I just thought, I was like, I'm gonna be a Renaissance man, right? Like, you know, never mind why I thought at 13 that, you know, I was gonna have something that I could do to be a Renaissance, but it just, you know, identified with that. So live a life that matters. You know, treat people the way you want to be treated. Be compassionate. So my parents were a fascinating public-private partnership. All right, so my dad didn't go to college. All right, he grew up single-parent home, New Orleans, inner city New Orleans. Never went to college. Very bright, but just that wasn't the focus. But he was entrepreneurial. Right? You know, and he was personable. People liked him. He made relationships. So he owned a bar, okay? And, you know, he did some other stuff when he was younger. I don't know what it was. Like, you know, I came home one day. This is a total aside, but, you know, my dad was 56 when I was born, right? So we had some serious gaps in how we communicated. And so one day, you know, he was trying to have like a bonding conversation with his son, and he said, Mike, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I was just being stupid, okay? I said, Dad, I want to be a pimp, right? I didn't want to be a pimp. I was just being a jerk, okay, right? My dad went on for like 10 minutes about the hardships of being a pimp. And I'm freaked out, right? Because I'm just like, What? Right? Like, I mean, just, you know, mama. Right? Like, so, but he, you know, and this is the power of entrepreneurship. That's why I tell my students, one generation, my family went from a man who never went to college to a son who's president of a college, right? And that's because of entrepreneurship. It's because of, you know, and he was very clear. He's like, listen, we're so proud of you. He's like, I'm glad that you can get into these schools that your intellect and my money allows you to go to, right? He said, but I don't ever want you to forget a few basic lessons about life. He said, life is a street hustle. He's like, learn a man's hustle, you can learn a man. He's like, once you learn a man, you can lead a man, right? And I never forgot that, right? So take the time to learn about what matters to others, right? The beliefs and their values, right? Those things are critically important. I mean, the list is so long. Like, I am a product of a Southern upbringing, okay? I mean, my parents, my grandparents, they were very intentional about what they taught me and what they expected. I mean, my grandmother and mother said, we expect you to lead. We expect you to lead your people. She said, like, we want you to make a lot of money. They said, but money can't be your master. If all you do is make a bunch of money, we're going to be profoundly disappointed in you. And so there, like, all of that is what runs through my veins. Yes, ma'am.
I really want to thank you for sharing this conversation. And I think for me, what struck me most is your intention for the people that come from low resource settings. And I just had a question of how do you ensure that you support them to spill over such a great influence you've given them, that even when long after they are gone out of college, they can support other people through that. I also come from a country in Africa where all women are women despite color. And so when you come to...
You said by women or women just by
color? Are women despite their color.
Despite their color, got it.
But when you come to the US, I hear women of color, a black woman, and all these things. And it's a little discomforting because in my opinion, all of us are women despite color. Yeah. And so I'd love to hear how you reinforce that, because I know that that change cannot happen from up. It has to start from upbringing. Yeah. And I know that even on the African continent, we might be having our own issues. But I think coming to a point of realizing that we are all women and support each other despite our differences to thrive, to excel, and to really go through life happy, like the sessions we've been going through this week. Thank you.
No, great questions. So let's start with the one about women are women first, all right? This is a country that doesn't see anything first other than race, all right? Now, we can dress it up, we can try and pretend that's not the case. I believe in keeping things real, okay? When I walk in a room, people don't talk about, oh, look at the bald-headed guy, right? That's a big black man. It's been that way my entire life. Like, my challenge is to manage through a life like that, right? Ironically, though, I think there's great power in that. You know, I don't let others' definition of me define me. Right? I define me for me, all right? I think that, and look, I am an enormous proponent of the power of women, okay? If you come to my college, you will notice that we have women throughout all the leadership roles. Right. In fact, I mean, if somebody wanted to sue us, men could sue us, okay? Because the vice president of academic affairs is a woman, the vice president of sponsored programs, special programs, she's a woman. The CFO is a man. Then you go to our director and dean's levels. The chief of staff's a man, and then pretty much everybody until you get to IT are women. All right. And this is the thing about our staff; it's incredibly diverse, all colors, all gender, I mean, all religions, all of that, right? And we have no diversity and inclusion programs, right? Because I don't believe in them, You know, I think you live by your values. If your values are clearly stated, and if you are faithful to those values, then they produce certain things, right? And so what we have learned is by focusing on the values, it allows people to relate to each other in the way in which you described. And it's why I believe so strongly in values-based leadership, all right? And adhering to those. And by the way, it doesn't mean that it's comfortable, right? Because when I get it wrong, I've got to own that. All right, and I can't just say, well, it wasn't my fault. Like, no, when I mess up, I stand in front of my staff and I say, I messed up, okay? Now, here's what I can do to fix it. Here's what we can do, but you gotta take ownership of that, all right? In terms of my students, I try to be transparent with my students. I mean, if you take my class, you have heard about my divorce. You heard about how much I love my current wife, and you know, you've met my family. You've heard about, you know, how my first semester in college, I had a grade point average that I was capable of doubling by my second semester in college. You hear it all, okay? Because I want them to understand that we are on a continuum. We're trying to improve. Our goal is to be better tomorrow than we were today. And that doesn't happen because every day is perfect. And then when they call, when they graduate, I answer their call. I talk to them. We stay in touch. And not everybody, like I don't force people to, you know, stay in touch. But, you know, when they do good things, like, you know, I'll make a note of it on Facebook and tell them, you know, congratulations. And, you know, and I'm just so proud of them to see how they've internalized the message and then put their spin on it, right? Because that's what you want. You don't want people walking around like a bunch of mini yous, right? You want them to take the essence of the lesson and apply it for themselves. And then you need to be there to support them as they find that way forward. So that's how at least I try to do it. No, you're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much for being here and for sharing this inspiring experience with us. It was stuck in my mind, the sentence that you said that learning to live with love changed my life and helped me in my career. And then that helped you with your students. But you also mentioned that at the beginning there were some members of the staff who didn't believe that much in a successful school. And I know that sometimes there are teachers or people who say that we are not paid to love students, but on the other hand, there are also other scholars that say that students or people do not like to learn by people who don't like them or don't love them. So what was the key of your success? What did you do to make your staff members love the students or to be successful?
Listen, our school, our culture, right? Now, if you don't want to buy into our culture, there are a lot of other schools you can go to. I help lots of people find places where they could be happy. Okay? I mean, which is, you know, another way of saying we had to part ways with a significant number of people. It is what it is, right? I am a better leader today than I was back then. I'm probably more patient, not much more tolerant, because my students need what they need, right? But I've learned how to, you know, how to help people find their best place without attacking them personally, right? Or destroying them personally. And I think early on, because of the stress, I mean, listen, when people tell you you have a year to turn something around or else the school goes away, I didn't always handle that well. I didn't know how to handle that well. And I didn't have anybody that could teach me because nobody else at school in a way had told them that before, right? So I prayed a lot. And I was angry and I was hurt and I was disappointed because it was so personal to me. And I just didn't understand how it wouldn't be that way for everyone. And so there were plenty of days where I thought, well, am I the crazy one, right? And then, you know, I stumbled back across the Apple Think Differently commercial, like here's to the crazy ones, all right? And it goes through all these examples of people that people thought were crazy. And at the end of it says, you know, the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do, all right? And we honestly believe we can change the world. And so, you know, and I know I'm about to get the hook, so I will tell you, you know, we have something we call our 5 rules of, you know, leadership, or it's President's 5 rules of leadership. The first one is show up, right? You can't lead if you don't show up, okay? And then the second one is show up prepared, okay? I mean, because if you're unprepared and you're there, you're still not very useful as a leader. You know, number 3, face your fears, okay? So much of what we do is based upon what we fear. Number 4, I always forget number 4, hold on. I'll jump ahead to number 5. Number 5 is, oh, no, number 4, I remember now. It's always ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? Number 3 was face your fears. So always ask yourself, what if you're wrong? Because sometimes we forget to do that. And then the 5th one is always speak to people's beliefs and their values. And if you do those things, you can be successful as a leader. No, thank you.
So, Michael,
one last question?
You can do one last question, and if it's a short one, and after that, I mean, since you have spent a lot of time talking to this group, and you have a sense of what they've been doing and what they plan to do going forward, maybe you could say a couple of words about really advice for them, given what you know. So, last question.
You talked a lot about the struggle in the beginning.
Struggle is real.
Yeah, I'm feeling it. But I wanted to know, how did you know when you turned that corner? Like, when did you know, like, I'm not at the edge all the time?
So this is something that you need to know about me. I don't think I'm there. Okay. I may never think I'm there, right? Like, I'm not that person, right? Like, I think the greatest thing that I'm going to do, I haven't done yet, right? My best day is tomorrow. So I don't stop and just say this. Here's what I can tell you. Well, because it's different, right? Like, the pressures are different. Because now people believe that it's possible. And the expectations have increased, right? It's why I spend all day on the phone trying to get buildings built and, you know, lead national movements and things like that, because people now have bought into it, right? And then you feel as if
Are you on a crisis? Do you feel like you're in a crisis mode? I guess that's
I didn't until we didn't have enough room for the students to live in, you know.
So it's a new crisis.
It's a new crisis, right? But the crises are better crises today than they were then, right? Like, my crisis now is, oh, look, we've got so many students that want to come to Paul Quinn, we have to have waiting lists. And we're out of space. Like, those are such better, I mean, you know, 7 years ago, we had 151 students. We couldn't even start school on time. You know, and I didn't tell this story back then, right? But, like, this is the truth of it. We had to go find students. I mean, we were going to churches on Sundays after church, being like, anybody in the congregation looking for an opportunity to go to college, right? Can you read? You want to read? Good enough, right? Like, I mean, and so, like, you don't ever really forget those things, you know? And now to be in a place that we've grown over 250% since then. Last 3 years, literally, we've had to have waiting lists. This year, we raised the entrance requirements, and we still couldn't meet the demand of students who wanted to come.
How many students do you have now?
Now we're up to 530, right? And, you know, and we don't want to be 10,000. We just want to be 1,500. We'd be a whole lot closer if we had room, right? But we don't have room, so we have to be careful. And we live in a community where there's no real housing options. All right, because Dallas is, if you've ever been to Dallas, it's truly a tale of two cities. If you're in the northern part of the city, you think life is great, this thing works, right? If you're in the southern part of the city, you could mistake some of those places for third world countries, right? And people get uncomfortable when you say that. There are other places that are amazing, and it doesn't mean the people are third world people. That's the point that is really what makes you the angriest, is because you meet these amazing people, right? Folks who are roses out of concrete, as Tupac would say, and they deserve better than what they have. And that makes you really angry, and it makes you really frustrated, and makes you commit to coming back again and again and again and fighting. I don't even know if I answered your question. I got all fired up. And, so, did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Not really? You sure? Or are you just being nice?
No, but it's just, I feel like, well, right now, to be honest, like, I feel like I'm living in crisis.
Yeah. So here's the thing that I'm going to tell you, and this goes to kind of like the advice part. Two things I can tell you will be incredibly helpful for you. Learn to manage the moments of being overwhelmed, okay? And know that those moments won't last forever, okay? They are here today, and they can scare you, and they can frustrate you, and you know, listen, I'm not a guy that cries a whole lot, right? Like, I'm telling you, literally 2 of the 3 times I've cried in the last 10 years, I'm sharing with you today, right? When we were fighting our accreditor, and the accreditor said that they were going to take away the accreditation, right? Which they never did because we sued them and, you know, we did some crazy stuff. I had poured my soul into it, right? Like, I mean, I had damn near died. I had poured everything I had into it. And I woke up that next morning after they told that, and I'd had to do a press, because that's the other thing. Everything was on the front page of the paper, right? So, I mean, there was no way to hide it. And, you know, when they said that, and I was brokenhearted. And I woke up that morning, and I just lost it, right? Like, I mean, I cried and cried and cried because I didn't know what was going to come next. And all I could do, literally all I could, and I heard my mother and grandmother and grandfather in my ear, and they said, sometimes, son, you just gotta drop to your knees, right? And just throw it on the Lord, right? And that's what I did. And you know, look, I can't quote a bunch of Bible passages, right? Like the Quinnite Bible passage is really the only one I know, right? But I'm a man of profound faith, okay? And literally, from that moment, we have taken off. And I didn't have anything left, right? I had done all I knew to do, all right? So everything that came after that, you know, I was clear where it came from. And I'm telling you this because you may be at the point where you feel like you don't know how you're gonna go on, right? That, like, something inside of you has been broken. All right, and all of us may go through those moments at different periods of time. You cannot give up, right? You cannot give up. At those moments, you have to find a way to calm yourself, right? To bring peace into your spirit and into your soul, right? And just breathe, and just breathe. That perspective, like if you're a praying person, pray. If you're not a praying person, just keep breathing. Okay, just, you know, because you're gonna get some help, right? And that's okay, right? I mean, turns out, you know, I have an aptitude for crises, right? Not the gift I would have wanted to have, but don't let it break you, right? Don't let it break you. Keep going, right? Keep being hopeful. You're here not because you aspire to be Fortune 100 CEOs, right? You're here because you believe in the spaces that you can make a difference in the lives of others. That is far more personable. It's far more personal, right? It puts you constantly in an emotionally fragile state because you are leading with your whole heart. You are leading with your whole soul. And when you do that, you are vulnerable, right? But the thing you need to keep in mind is you're not vulnerable alone. Just like my mother put her arms around me in that kitchen, there are people out there waiting to put their arms around you. You just need to let them know you need them, right? So that might be the last piece of advice that I can give, you know. No, thank you, man. It's my pleasure, my pleasure.